BC, which is totally unknown to us outside them.
Most of the scrolls belong to Philodemus. Poet, philosopher and literary theorist, Philodemus was close to some of the greatest minds in ancient Rome.
You get to know the man intimately. He just comes off these papyri into your room. This guy was a beloved member of high Roman society. He clearly knew great people like Lucretius, Catullus, and Cicero. Of his own generation and of the next generation, he taught people like Virgil and Horace. Now we know how Virgil was educated. Now we know what kind of lectures he heard when he went to school.
The writings reveal that Philodemus was a disciple of Epicurean philosophy. Epicurus was a Greek philosopher living in 300 BC. He rejected God and an afterlife and advocated the pursuit of pleasure through the avoidance of pain as a way of life. Under Philodemus's influence, Epicurean philosophy attracted a strong following.
Epicureans basically say, there's no God you need to worry about. There's only life. When you die, so that wasn't a welcome message in the 18th century. It might seem a little more relevant now.
The upper echelons of Roman society embraced Greek culture, particularly the philosophical teachings. After Philodemus's death, Epicureans still came to study the papyri, which championed the carpe diem, seize the day attitude.
We must exercise ourselves in the things which bring happiness, since if that be present, we have everything.
Epicureans valued stimulation of the mind as a route to happiness too.
Let no one be slow to seek wisdom when he is young, nor weary in the search for it when he grows old.
Herculaneum was no workaday town. Its elegant private and public buildings reflected the Epicurean belief in living life on earth to the full. Epicurus himself saw the route to happiness as simply the absence of pain. But by the 1st century AD, the hedonistic pursuit of pleasure had become an end in itself. Herculaneum's suburban baths are spectacular, reflecting the residents' devotion to physical pleasure.
Water is one of the defining features, if you think about it, of Roman civilization. Aqueducts, baths. And baths like these were one of the great technological marvels of the Roman Empire. Coming to the baths was a really important social occasion. Everyone in the town does it. If you look around the houses, very few of them have private baths. The very rich have baths, but those too would be places where they'd invite their friends to, because bathing is a communal activity. And it's like any social activity, it's full of its rituals. You don't simply bathe. You do lots of things. It's a matter of personal choices. You go to your doctor before you go to the baths. You consult, how am I feeling? Have I got a slight fever? And he will tell you what sequence of baths to take.
Bathing was a social event, providing plenty of opportunity for intellectual discussion. It was an essential daily ritual.
In the centre there, you've got a sort of bronze boiler effect into which the water continually flows, gets warmed up and recirculated. So here you've got space for a couple of dozen people to bathe at the same time.
What better environment in which to indulge in the liberal attitudes of the time? Graffiti confirmed that the baths were also a place for sexual gratification, evident in this poem written by Philodemus.
Demo and Thermion both slay me. One's a pro, the other still unversed in your ways. The one I can grope, the other I mustn't touch. I swear, goddess, I don't know which I want more. I say, little virgin Demo, I don't want it off the rack, but long for what's under lock and key.
Demo and Thermion were young boys. Scrolls from the villa also confirm that Epicurean teachings promoted equality between people, even advocating the abolition of slavery. At Herculaneum, slaves could work their way up to full Roman citizenship.
This is actually a classic of a smart Roman house. You come in from the door, you're into a big atrium, the tablinum, an enormous great reception area, and then out at the back here you have a garden surrounded by columns, what's often called a peristyle, and that's really a sign of real success. And of course, what we ask is, what's the kind of guy who lives in this sort of magnificence? And he's a guy who really has made it, but he started as a slave. And the story then goes on, because just over there is the college of the smartest ex-slaves in town. Well, this is a really unusual and interesting building. It's not a private house, but it's a sort of clubhouse. They call it the Collegium Augustalium, the College of the Augustales. And if you want to know what an Augustales is, you come over here. And the first thing, Augusto Sacrum, sacred to Augustus. It's always a surprise for us to realize that they worshipped the emperor, either the living emperor or the dead emperor, but worshipped as a god.
The members of this exclusive gentlemen's club were wealthy ex-slaves. Here they set up a shrine in honor of the only human being in mythology ever to have been promoted to a god, Hercules, the man after whom the town of Herculaneum was named.
Hercules is, among the gods, the human who was promoted to divine status. Hercules becomes a god as a reward for all his labors. And there couldn't be a more appropriate god for these freedmen who are slaves, who have become citizens as a reward for their labors.
The suddenness of the catastrophe which struck Herculaneum has allowed its story to be told. This town was frozen in time at the very moment of its destruction. The impact of that moment on the estimated 5,000 people who lived here has never been examined. When Herculaneum was first excavated 50 years ago, no bodies were found. A gruesome discovery just a few years ago changed all that.
We've been working together for a few years on integrating the study of archaeological remains and anthropological findings so that we can understand better the effects of the eruption on objects and people.
Volcanologist Giuseppe Mastro Lorenzo and anthropologist Pier Paolo Petrone have found out that the last moments of Herculaneum were very different from that of its neighbor Pompei. From the very moment the pyroclastic flow burst from Vesuvius's crater, Herculaneum was doomed. A study of the research shows that the avalanche had an internal temperature of 325 degrees centigrade. Traveling at 65 feet a second, the flow covered the distance of 7 miles from crater to coast in just 4 minutes. Herculaneum was consumed and preserved in seconds.
Even though they lived beneath one, people at the time had little understanding of volcanoes. To most people, it was just a mountain.
It has taken scientists until the last 20 years to fully grasp the violence and the speed of Herculaneum's destruction. Until then, the ferocity of pyroclastic flows was little understood. As no bodies were discovered in earlier excavations, it was assumed that everyone had escaped. But in 1981, scientists made a chilling discovery. Along Herculaneum's original seashore were a row of boat chambers. When they were exposed, it was found that hundreds of people had taken refuge here, spending their last moments huddled together for comfort. Crowded 30 or 40 to a chamber beneath a layer of light ash were dozens of human remains, caught at the precise moment of their death.
For the first time here, we've had the opportunity to study groups of skeletons in situ, in the exact position where they died. People were frozen exactly where they sat when they felt the full impact of the pyroclastic flow.
Studies of the remains reveal that this was a moment of horror. Petroni and Mastro Lorenzo found evidence of heat so extreme that teeth shattered. Examination of the skulls suggests that the blood inside them may have boiled. The bodies of over 300 people have been found so far. A few had reached the beach, but most people crammed into the 12 boat chambers. The position of the bodies as a group tells a powerful story. Bound in a fearful embrace, they were boiled, then smothered by a pyroclastic flow they probably didn't even see coming. Their reclining positions suggest that most were asleep. In one corner, the bones of an unborn child were found beneath those of its mother's ribcage. Most likely waiting to be evacuated by sea, their discovery has also thrown up an intriguing question.
There is a varied cross-section of people within the chambers. Adults, children, young people, women, men. But there are no old people. Very few people over 40. So, where are the other people of Herculaneum?
The absence of Herculaneum's older inhabitants is puzzling. Were the older citizens, the intellectual elders, so revered that they were first to be evacuated?
There's no God you need to worry about. There's only life. When you die, so that wasn't a welcome message in the 18th century. It might seem a little more relevant now.
The upper echelons of Roman society embraced Greek culture, particularly the...
He just comes off these papyri into your room. This guy was a beloved member of high Roman society. He clearly knew great people like Lucretius, Catullus, and Cicero of his own generation.
300 BC. He rejected God and an afterlife and advocated the pursuit of pleasure through the avoidance of pain as a way of life. Under Philodemus's influence, Epicurean philosophy attracted a strong following.
Epicureans basically say BC, which is totally unknown to us outside them.
Most of the scrolls belong to Philodemus. Poet, philosopher, and literary theorist, Philodemus was close to some of the greatest minds in ancient Rome.
You got to know the man in his generation, and of the next generation, he taught people like Virgil and Horace. Now we know how Virgil was educated. Now we know what kind of lectures he heard when he went to school.
The writings reveal that Philodemus was a disciple of Epicurean philosophy. Epicurus was a Greek philosopher living in